Here.
Here.
Neil, present.
Okay. Here, present. We hear your building.
Okay, there being a quorum present, we'll now hear two, an HR and an HCR, both at the same time because they're remarkably similar, by the HCR 32 and HR 425, sponsored by Representative Ross. Please begin when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Ross, representing the 142nd District. Today, before you, I have HCR 32 and House Resolution 425, as the chairman mentioned, remarkably similar. One's basically a statement by the House, and the other we would be asking the Senate to concur with us. But these relate to power production in the state of Missouri. Currently, in the state, we produce greater than 80% of our power by coal-fired power plants. Last year, for those of you that were here, I'll take you back to HCR 30, the current resolution in which both the House and the Senate overwhelmingly agreed and asked that the EPA use some common sense with respect to how they were going to create these rules and what they would say at the end of the day. And essentially, we were asking for a modification of those rules. But what we're looking at is overreach by the EPA in what they're asking here. And this directly conflicts with some of our responsibilities as a legislative body. In looking at what these rules that have been proposed, what they would do, they're asking us to decrease our electric use by 10%, phased in over several years, to increase natural gas, the uses of natural gas by 40%, and to increase the amount of electricity generated by renewables by 300%. And they're asking for a 6% increase in efficiency at the power plants. That sounds great, but the problem, when you look at the effect that this would have on our state, the people, the businesses, it would be devastating in the amount that they would actually be paying for their power at this point. And frankly, some of the hardest hit would be those on low and a fixed income. So going back once again to our responsibilities as a legislative body, we're now through HCR 32 and HR 42, strongly urging the EPA to withdraw the rules that they've now adopted. With that, I would be more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor? Representative Redmond.
Inquire.
Proceed.
Good afternoon.
Great afternoon.
I like this. What is EPA's slap? What are they going to slap us with if we don't do this?
Well, of course, there's always, the federal funding trick that, well, we're going to reduce your funding with this. That, to some degree, would remain to be seen. I think in this particular case, going back to what I mentioned, is our legislative duty in setting this forth. I'm not sure just what strings they would attempt to pull.
Okay, you think it'd be tied? Okay, so we don't know exactly what, but it's going to be tied.
There may be other witnesses that can answer that question. I can't face value tell.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Colon.
Thank you, Chief Clerk.
Proceed.
So, gentlemen, my assumption is that when all these regulations go into place, utility companies will actually save money.
I don't know that I'd agree with that. In fact, I would disagree with that.
Oh, I didn't know. All I heard was the "Don't tread on me" snake flag being waved.
I don't have one of those handy.
I was hoping to hear some traditional Republican value reasons why these regulations are bad, other than, you know, Obama's evil. But
I missed that one, but
I'm sure we'll have some folks that can testify on that angle. Here's what I don't remember. When are these rules supposed to go into effect?
I can look that up. I believe June, sometime.
Of this year?
Next year, I came from the back.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Representative Ellington,
To inquire, Mr. Chair.
proceed.
I apologize, I came in late, I was sitting outside the wrong committee hearing. Why are we doing this? Or why are you doing this?
In simple terms, as I said, last year we passed House Concurrent Resolution 30, in which we were urging the EPA to modify what they were asking for. They said, no, we're not going to do that. They proceeded through the adoption of the proposed rule at that time. So now we're saying, look, this is really going to be a problem for our state and the citizens. We're saying withdraw the rule through this House resolution and concurrent resolution.
And what's the problem again? I just want to make sure I'm 100% clear.
The problem is going to be, and the way that this affects how our electricity is generated here in the state of Missouri, we generate over 80% of our power through coal power plants. These rules are going to increase cost for the everyday consumer. That's the bottom line. I mean, if you want a quick answer, this is as proposed. These rules will increase our power, the cost for our power by 80%.
Okay, 80% to consumers.
You multiply your monthly electric bill by 1.8, and that's going to be your new bill if these rules are implemented.
Okay, and it's the HCR, right? So that means we're basically going to pass something that has no teeth in it from the General Assembly?
Well, I wouldn't say that. We have a HR, which is the House, this side, making the statement, but then we have the HCR, in which we respectfully request for the concurrence of the Senate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ellington. I've got a quick question for the sponsor. Basically, what you're telling us then is that we're going to increase the rates to the everyday consumers, and it's going to be a minimal, if negligible, change in the environment.
That is exactly correct.
Thank you. Representative McNeil.
Thank you, Ted Black.
Proceed.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, you're absolutely right. We are 80% dependent upon coal, and to this date, it has been a relatively inexpensive form of energy. Are there other states, particularly in this region, that are in a similar sort of situation, so dependent upon coal?
There are other states, as far as being able to list those off. I mean, I can't do that. One of the funny things in these proposed rules by the EPA, they keep going back to the state of California, which 15-20% of their power is actually generated by coal, but they were mentioned over 22 times in this particular set of rules. This would affect a vast majority of the states, in our country.
Well, so
Negatively.
right, and basically in your resolution, you say the rules ask that we decrease electricity by the use of electricity through energy efficiency by 10%. Is that right in your resolution?
That's what the EPA is approving.
Okay. That's what it says.
And I don't think, I don't think it's a bad thing for any of us to say that we're going to improve efficiency with respect to how we use electricity. That's rather than from the appropriate places.
Right.
How you as a consumer want to increase your electric efficiency.
Right. Do you feel that 10% is unreasonable?
Well, I'm not, I don't know that I'm here to debate 10%, 20%, 5%, what that number should actually be. But the issue is in the way that it's coming about, rather than you as a consumer making that decision that you want to, lower your electric bill. This is, the good old federal bureaucracy telling you that this is what you're going to do.
Right. And they also told us that we need to increase renewables by 300%.
That's correct.
But we really have didn't start. I mean, renewables are pretty new energy on the.
Sure.
So increasing 300% may bring our renewables up to what percentage do you think?
Well, and I'm not sure what that would be. I mean, it's just not reality that regardless of which avenue of renewables you want to talk about, that those would be able to replace what we're currently generating by coal right now.
I know the voters in Proposition C several years ago did ask this state to, and say they wanted us to increase renewables to, I think it's 20% cut of our portfolio. Is that right? That's 20%. So I think the citizens of Missouri spoke pretty clearly on their desire to see us go that route. So I guess, what I'm wondering, I know that, I think I heard a number of years ago that the EPA put out a ruling back in the 90s, early 90s, asking, to cut, well, actually, I'm gonna delete that question. But anyway, I'll ask that another time. I think it's important that, we be forward thinking on energy, and I question whether we as a body would act on something unless we were kind of prodded a little bit. And it seems to me the EPA is, and whether this is heavy-handed or not, that's a question that needs to be discussed. But at the same time, to have an edict from the EPA may be necessary because we haven't in this state really made it much of an interest, and I do happen to think that there's harm to putting carbon into the air. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like everybody to keep in mind that we've got a sponsor in front of us, and our job here is to ask questions of that sponsor. If you'd like to make a statement, just ask me to make a statement, and I'll consider it. But prior to that, I would just assume you ask questions to go forward. Anyone else? Representative Barry.
Good part.
Proceed.
The percentages that you listed, the 300%, all the different ones, is that a guideline? Or because from what I've read, that it's 22% cut of carbon emissions, and that they'll allow a state to do it any way they want to. That outline that you've just said by 300% renewable, by 6% at the power plants, that's not a mandate. The 22% is the mandate. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. I mean, they're looking at that. I'm not sure whether that's a hard number or whether it's I doubt anything from the EPA is going to be suggested. But
Okay. Is there somebody? Do you have a witness or DNR?
I think there's several that might be coming.
I'll ask that in a few minutes then. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions? Representative Corley.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you, Representative Ross. First of all, one of the questions was, whether you have somebody that can speak to the feasibility of even implementing the rules within the time frame. Somebody will be testifying to that.
I think there's going to be a number of individuals that will speak directly to that.
Okay. And then the second thing is, we are talking about the EPA's proposed CO2 rules, or what they've deemed the clean power.
Correct. They're also referred to as the 111D rules, but yes.
Okay. And my question was, in the HCR and the HR, we do not specify what rule specifically we're asking them to withdraw. We just say the proposed rule. And I wondered if you'd be agreeable to an amendment to actually specifically name the rule, and perhaps by number or name or whatever, just to be more specific.
Sure. I mean, if you want to discuss that, that'd be fine. But I mean, in what they have proposed currently, I'm not sure that we're able to pick and choose as a body.
Well, or the general concept, because I just noticed that, we say withdraw the proposed rule, but we don't really specify, and so it's a little bit ambiguous. Maybe it's a lawyer and we want to be a little more specific, but you know, to name what that is.
Sure, and once again, I don't know that we have the latitude of saying, you know, for this particular, for what they have proposed right now. I mean, you've got this conglomerate of, you know, here's what they adopted, they have set forward as, here's the rule. So I'm not sure that we as a body could say, well, you know, we don't like paragraph 3, section 4 of this.
Right. Or maybe the proposed CO2 rules or proposed clean power rules or something to that effect.
Well, I mean, maybe there's some misunderstanding there, because I think that's what we're saying about, you know, last year we asked, you know, so we said, take into consideration our situation here in Missouri. And, you know, they totally ignored that, and now they've adopted all of this. So that's, you know, that's where we're saying, hey, you need to change these rules. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, is there anyone here today that would like to testify in favor of these two resolutions?
Good afternoon. I'm Brent Stewart with the Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives, and we'd like to go on record in support of both resolutions. While I'm not an expert on the 1,000-page proposed rule, I would be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Representative Colonna,
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good o'clock.
please.
Here's what I don't recall. You guys don't have Columbia, right? They're an independent.
Yeah, they're a municipally owned utility.
I will save my question for those folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Barrett. Proceed.
Could you answer the question I asked? As far as the 22% cut in CO2, are the states told how they have to go about that cut?
It's very legally controversial whether they can do what they're doing, but I believe their intent was to set, like you say, set that cap or that target. And they've given 4 building blocks, they call them, on various ways that a state might achieve that target. One of them is the efficiency, making your coal plants more efficient. I believe it was 6%. There's an energy efficiency component. There's the natural gas, ramping up the utilization of natural gas component, and I can't remember the other one.
You know, talking to your organization and to the other organizations, do you feel it's even legitimate that you can get a 6% efficiency out of the current power plant?
No.
Okay,
I'll tell you why. And certainly, I don't want to speak for the other utilities really, but in the cooperative world, our members, we're not for profit, and we try to wring out every efficiency we possibly can with our power plants. And frankly, we think we have done everything that's on an economic basis. I mean, we can spend a lot more money and squeeze out some more efficiency perhaps, but
not get that 6%.
exactly.
So if that's not possible, we're going, and we have to, under the supposition that we're going to make that 22% cut, we'll have to do more in another one of those building blocks. Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And just, is there any equation that you see for us to be able to get there?
Well, as I sit here right now, no. And one of the problems we're having is this rule, as proposed, has created a lot of uncertainty as to just what they mean in certain areas. The other complicating factor is this rule the final rule has not come out yet. We were expecting it. The EPA announced it would be in late June, but we've heard that they're going to probably wait until even the end of summer before we actually see what they propose. And one of the fears we have is they could come in and change the allocations among the states. For example, Arkansas is hit a lot harder with the gas piece, for example, than Missouri is. So we expect Arkansas to be screaming pretty loudly about that component. And if the EPA, which it can do before it issues its final rule, decides, well, maybe Missouri ought to have 40% as a target because it has some natural gas or whatever the reasoning might be, that makes it very problematic. We've got a moving target here. So it's very difficult to see how all those pieces would fit together. The theory was, though, that the states would have the ability to craft this outside the fence stuff,
Okay, so
coming up with their state implementation.
let me follow up on that real quick, and this will be the last question. With a state implementation plan versus a federal implementation plan, which would you prefer?
We like to stick with the devil we know on the state implementation plan. We would prefer to be working through all of these difficult issues with the State Department of Natural Resources, who we have a long relationship with. One of the other questions that came up, and this may be a good time to try to answer that, is, well, what happens, what authority or what, how are they going to come and hit the hammer on us if we don't comply? The EPA has some very broad authority in environmental regulations, and they issue what they call a notice of violation, and it costs tons and tons and tons of money to deal with those notices of violation. And that in and of itself is enough reason to want to stick with the state implementation plan over the federal.
Thank you very much.
Representative Remley. Inquire, proceed.
You all have spent approximately how much money on the power plants to meet the EPA requirements over the years?
Starting with the SO2, sulfur dioxide, acid rain requirements, I want to say to date we've spent in excess of $1.4 billion.
Okay.
And we've reduced our emissions on those pollutants that were covered by 90%.
Did you ahead of the time, did you meet that ahead of the schedule, the EPA?
Yes, we did, and we have continued to do that, mainly because if we wait, we try to make a prediction, and you never know what they're going to hit you with, but we try to make a prediction as to where they're going, so we can put into place the equipment, whatever it may be requiring, changing our operations in advance, because it's frankly cheaper to do that for our members than it is to wait till after the rule comes out and then try to catch up.
Are you currently, right now, always trying to find better ways to even improve your operations?
Absolutely, and there are a number of, I can provide the committee with some examples of that. Not today, I can certainly get you some things. The one thing that keeps popping into mind, it has nothing to do with carbon dioxide, but they've got something going with the University of Missouri dealing with coal ash, and they're making bricks or doing some sort of thing. I know that they've tried to burn corn cobs in some of the power plants. They've looked at a number of other types of alternatives to try to reduce emissions on a wide variety of pollutants. And by the way, carbon dioxide, I don't believe is classified technically as a pollutant.
Do you know approximately how many jobs it would affect if they were to shut down a power plant? The power plant in our neck of the woods, or even New Madrid?
Well, Thomas Hill, for example, and you probably know the exact number of employees better than I do, but I can tell you that Thomas Hill, for example, I doubt if it can be converted into a natural gas power plant and keep the jobs.
That's what I was going to go to. Also, I know that a lot of railroad jobs are dependent upon the coal. As a matter of fact, when I park my car, all the time I see coal trains going along the highway, and I appreciate all that you guys do. I am in support of the bill.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, I want to classify it as a silly question because it's a silly part of the proposed rule. If the economy starts rolling again, we start adding jobs, we start adding industry, we start getting a lot of stuff happening in Missouri, what's going to happen to the electric demand?
It's going to go up.
It's going to go up. So we've got the federal government asking us to go in the opposite direction that we want to go for jobs, industry growth, a better life. They're asking us to go the other way.
I agree with your assessment.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ellington,
One choir.
proceed.
I got a couple questions for you. The EPA, what does the EPA do?
They are charged with a national approach to environmental regulations. It's very, very broad in their scope, everything from clean air, clean water, wood burning stove manufacturing.
So it's safe to say that they're tasked with the job of creating regulations and watching out for the environment. What do you do?
The rural electric cooperatives do something very simple. We exist to provide electricity to our members in rural areas where otherwise there wouldn't be any electricity.
So is that a profit-driven co-op?
No, rural electric cooperatives are nonprofit.
Well, a profit doesn't necessarily mean that you don't make a profit, though.
We don't make a profit, we make a margin. And let me give you an example of what that is.
I understand the difference between the margin and profit. So what was your margin, the last margin? Because you gave us a total of $1.4 billion for the acid rain. So how much margin do y'all make?
It depends on the co-op. We have 47 co-ops in our system. Each one has different requirements by the United States Department of Agriculture to the extent they're borrowing money through the RUS Rural Utility Service. They have something they call a tier, a times interest something ratio. And please don't ask me how that formula works, but there is a certain minimum requirement for our lenders that we charge, have enough built into the margin to service the debt and continue and keep the system in shape. But there is no profit to.
And I understand the difference between margins and profits and how money gets spent. So is it safe to say that out of the 42, 1.4 billion would be a small fraction of how much the margins generate?
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Y'all generate more in margins than 1.4 billion with the 42 co-ops that's involved.
I'm not sure I can give you a good answer to that. I'd have to go back and check. But that $1.4 billion is over a period of several years.
Mm-hmm. Now I got that. It sounds like a scary number. When we look about how much resources actually generated, that 1.4 billion gets smaller. It's kind of the same with the budget that we have at the state. It's a big number. When we look at how the money is distributed, we see that it's not a scary looking figure as it sounds. So out of the 90%, you say you had a 90% reduction in negative emissions that was instituted in the acid rain. Was that correct?
All pollutants that have been regulated up to this point and that we were required to reduce.
Okay, so if y'all had a 90% reduction and that came off the EPA regulations, so it's safe to say, it ain't even safe to say, it's a fact, that y'all was polluting the environment 90% more than what y'all was doing until y'all started getting hit with different regulations.
I'm not going to deny, Representative, that the regulations have resulted in cleaner air. I agree with you on that.
Okay, so going back to this regulation, would you deny that this regulation would improve anything? Because I know we're getting all the scary things that people are going to lose jobs, the economy is going to suffer, utility bills is going to go up. What else y'all got in here? And we're going to reduce the grid by messing with our coal industry. But will anything improve?
Well, I don't want to be glib, but when I breathe out and you breathe out, Representative Ross breathes out, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. And it's a little different than the pollutants that you were talking about, the NOx, the SOx, all of those. There's a huge debate on the CO2 and whether it's a problem for climate change. We've got people on both sides, very qualified people that have differences of opinion, and we don't get into that debate. If the law is that we reduce CO2 emissions, we're going to reduce CO2 emissions.
Okay, now the reason I was asking because a debate is something that people have when they have conflicting opinions, but we know when we look at the environment that there's certain things that are happening that has not been happening before, such as ice caps are melting, Niagara Falls is freezing over. it's all types of things that we could talk about, and we could debate if it's climate change or non-climate change, but we know it wasn't happening previously. And all of a sudden, we have all type of different, unaccounted for weather that's been happening over time. And if we look at some of the scientists, they actually justify what's been happening by their recommendations, what they said was gonna happen once we hit a certain level of carbon dioxide, et cetera, in our atmosphere. And the reason I was asking again is I'm concerned about what we've been doing here, in particular with all these resolutions that we've been having coming out against different regulations about an agency. The only task is to make sure that the environment is safe. And typically, the people that we hear from is corporations and companies that benefit.
You have a question?
No, it is a question. That benefit from deregulation. So how would this not improve the environment, or how would this not benefit citizens of the state of Missouri?
If there was an environmental benefit, and again, that's, some people will debate that, I'm not gonna debate that, then yeah, it's a good thing. The question becomes, at what cost? Where is the cost? And from the cooperative's perspective, we have some very low income compared to the other utilities. A lot of our rural people are senior citizens, more so than most, have homes that are not really susceptible to weatherization, energy efficiency. They're older homes. We've got people on fixed incomes higher than the average for others. And our concern is not so much against the EPA from the co-op perspective. It is the impact that these regulations can have on our members and their ability to afford electricity. And that's where we come from on the question.
This will be the last series of questions, because you just hit a very valid point. So when we talk about weatherization and making property more energy efficient, how does that affect the margins that the co-op makes, as opposed to having things that leak out, which causes more uses of electricity?
There's absolutely no question that the more the customers, or in our case, the members, or the less that they use, the less revenues we have to provide the service. That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so what resources do y'all give consumers to make sure that their property is weatherized? That way we're actually reducing our energy uses, as opposed to being afraid of what type of regulations will require us to reduce them.
I believe, and I think this is correct, the co-ops were the first in the state to start an energy efficiency weatherization type program. I don't remember when it started, but it's been many years ago. And as of today, they tell me that we've saved enough energy to run the city of Springfield for a year. That's how much energy savings we've been able to accomplish. And we do that through rebates on, like many other utilities, rebates on energy efficiency, appliances,
So has that
ground
reduced
source heat
people's
pumps.
bills? Has that reduced people's bills? I'm just curious.
To the extent that the rest of the costs haven't gone up for other reasons yet.
So it was no broad-based price reduction when the increase in margins happened. But if they have regulations that require y'all to spend more money on securing and being more energy efficient, it's a guarantee that we're gonna have broad-based increases. So it goes back to the original question, that y'all more concerned about the margins than you are about anything else. Because if y'all made more money and y'all was able to benefit more to y'all margins, why didn't y'all decrease people's rates?
If we could do
Hiring people.
if we could do anything to decrease the costs in the cooperative system, that keeps the rates down. Anything, whether it's more efficient use of the plants or whatever. You hit on a very important economic point, though, and it's not so much fits with the cooperatives, but generally it fits across the board, that the more you reduce the demand, the more, in order to stay whole, just if a dollar for dollar, all the way up to an investor-owned utility that needs to make its rate of return, the more somebody's going to have to pay that difference. And so it's a problem. It is an economic problem.
And this is the last question. what have y'all been doing currently to reduce the need to utilize coal? Have y'all been investing in different type of energy alternatives?
Absolutely. In the co-op system, we have a significant amount of hydropower, which actually is the cheapest of all energy sources, fuel sources. Unfortunately, that's kind of limited with the amount of hydro that's available, but we use that as a maximum. The co-ops have also invested in natural gas combined cycle plants, new plants. We actually, in the co-op world, have more capacity in natural gas than we do coal. We use the coal, of course, because it's still cheaper to run it that way. And finally, the co-ops were the first in the state to bring in wind power. And we will have hopefully by the end of the year, 750 megawatts of pure wind power available on our system.
So the coal is cheaper because the cheaper forms of energy have not been fully invested in? Is that safe to say?
That, and because of the nature of coal, you get more bang out of the source.
Currently.
Yeah, currently. And if we had new technology, it would be great.
All right, so basically, and this is a question, not a statement.
You were asking You're already on the last.
I can't count. We haven't put enough resources in public education. So currently,
I'll count for you.
All right, we're done. Representative Hoover. Proceed.
Just to clarify, please, as a nurse, we have, which is my normal trade, we have best practices. I'm assuming in any type of business, you have best practices, and as you find those best practices that will improve efficiency, reduce negative, consequences and whatnot, you implement those. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor of these two House resolutions?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is David Overfelt. I'm a registered lobbyist for Associated Industries of Missouri. Yes, we do support HCR 32, and I've read a lot of studies. And everything points to hundreds of billions of dollars in cost, 200 and some thousand jobs lost every year through 2030. The impact of the environment, I mean, some studies say 3 sheets of paper to the ocean, maybe, but then within 7 months, China and India will make it up. I mean, take it for what it is. These rules are going to cost us a lot of jobs, and the impact environmentally worldwide is going to be minimal. And it's going to be made up by our competitors that are taking a number of jobs from America and are producing and are not following the same rules that we want them to.
All right, questions for this witness, Representative Neal. Proceed.
Morning, or afternoon, gentlemen. Gentlemen, you noted a lot of jobs lost, but you take into account jobs that are created in the renewable energy area or in energy efficiency in the homes and the light bulbs and that kind of thing?
As I understand it, that was part of the studies. I mean, it's the offset. It's just the sheer cost of what they'll be to the energy, et cetera, that's going to have an impact. If you look at those models, economic models, it's going to be a cost increase.
Yeah, I do know that there is a growing number of jobs in the renewable area, and I've heard the argument too that China has all these are going to be going forward and whatever. But although I know that China has been investing big time in renewable energies, they're probably going to pass us up in that. And may take over all that. So I mean, I think that China is doing some.
It's not anywhere near. I spent 6 months in China. I've traveled the whole country. No, they're putting up coal plants as fast as possible too.
Yeah. you think we'll ever be able to build more coal plants in this state?
Not with these rules.
Would we without these rules? I mean, where would we with the rules that were currently in place?
Maybe in the future when we have less resources and natural gas maybe becomes too expensive. Nuclear
Right now.
is very expensive. I mean, there could be a day that we have to.
Yeah. But right now, we probably, in the foreseeable future, there will be no more coal, probably no more coal plants in Missouri.
Natural gas makes the most sense right now.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Any other questions for this witness? Representative Revin?
I was clicking my pen.
Well, stop again. President Ellington, I think you need to take a break.
No, this is one question.
One quick question?
Yeah, no, one question.
Okay.
How many jobs are we gonna lose?
Well, for one study, I've seen 244,000 jobs through 2030.
Thank you, Representative Ellington. Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Any other witnesses in favor of these two resolutions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pleasure to be here today. My name is Jay Atkins. I'm a registered lobbyist and the general counsel for the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are happy to go on record today in support of both these resolutions and appreciate the representative's hard work in carrying these. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Make sure you fill out a witness form. Anybody that's already testified, please do that. Any questions for this witness? Representative McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Second time I've heard you testify today.
Always a pleasure.
But much cuter testimony before with your son, I'll tell you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, gentlemen, do you have any idea, any figures on the number of jobs that you feel that would be lost? I mean, do you see power plants closing down? Is that the idea?
I do. I think so. I think it's fair.
Okay, but I mean, like on the Ameren side, now they'll probably speak, but there'll be, we've got some pretty old power plants that are going to need to be dealt with anyway. So do you see any, I mean, what kind of a industry do you see developing in the renewable side with the wind and solar?
Well, I don't know. If you'll permit me, Representative, I don't have that number. I don't know how many jobs we're going to lose, but you're keying in on a pretty important problem here, and that is, to some degree, we're our own worst enemy on this deal, right? We're creating a framework where we can't build any more coal plants, and the ones we have are old and we're shutting them down. Natural gas is a viable alternative, but in state after state, we're seeing movements to either ban or severely restrict hydraulic fracturing, which was one of our primary sources to extract natural gas. So we're not going to have anything to power natural gas plants with, and certainly no price stability, which makes things difficult not only for the producers but for the manufacturers. We want to invest in renewable energies, wind and solar, but and they're a fine way to supplement a portfolio, but you can't create a base load off those. We don't have any way to long-term store it. There are theories out there that say you could solve that problem by perpetually moving it around the world or around the infrastructure and siphon it off as you need it, and continually pump power into it. But we can't build the infrastructure. We don't have the money to build the infrastructure. It costs a lot of money, and it takes a long time to invest in the infrastructure. So we need to work on that. Nuclear would be a great option, but it's almost impossible to get a nuclear power plant built. It's not only very expensive, the pile of regulations you have to go through to do that are worse than they are to build a coal plant, which we've already established we can't do. So I get the problem. We need energy. We have a source, but we're not allowed to use it. So we're putting ourselves in a pretty tough spot on this deal. So the inevitable result of all of that, of that framework we built, is that we're going to have less energy available. We're going to have to pay more for it, and we're going to lose jobs because of it. Because where we're heading with this.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. Basically, if we had the infrastructure, the grid, updated grid to do this, we could then use the renewable energy and push it off to, I mean, send it to where it can be used, correct? If we had an updated grid.
Sure, there's a couple thoughts on that. One, yes, that would certainly help. I don't know that it would solve the problems completely, but it would certainly help. But that also, you're also opening the door to some of the other issues that exist in regulations of this type, and that is the demand for consumer efficiency that the EPA is requiring here, which I'm not certain that they have the regulatory authority or the constitutional authority to do. But that's kind of you would need, for some of those things to be enforced, a smart grid would help enforce some of those things, but then there's questions about whether or not they even have the legal authority to do that. I think our position would be they do not. But there's problems with that as well. From a strictly engineering perspective, though, I think certainly a more robust smart grid would help us to maximize some of those renewables.
Probably be better for us economically if we could find the money to do that, I imagine, but that's another issue, another bill.
Sure.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Clum.
Inquire.
See.
I know this will lead to more litigation, just like protecting gay people in employment, so that's why you're against it. But get to a real question. Representative Corley started on a line of questioning that really we haven't followed up on, and that is how about some facts and specifics. How long is the EPA going to give utility companies to come into compliance with these new rules and regulations?
Well, I don't know. The rule's supposed to be finalized June 15th of this year. It looks like they're pushing that date back. Once the rule is final, what is it, a year?
Yeah, final next June 2016.
Okay.
But then into 2030.
Okay, to comply for full implementation of assuming that the reduction remains at whatever percentage it is. I think it's the time horizon is 2030.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other witnesses in favor of these two resolutions?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bill Gamble with the Missouri Railroad Association. We'd like to go on record in support of both resolutions.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Ken Menges. I am the state legislative director for the Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Union, and we are the workers that haul the coal. We are the ones that put the scrubbers in the tower to make the air cleaner, and we are the ones that will lose our jobs when this goes into effect. Right now, 40% of our jobs in Missouri, our rail jobs, are derived from coal, not counting the miners, the electrical workers, etc. So it is a big impact. And then the sheet metal industry are the ones that actually put the scrubbers in and clean the air out. So I represent almost 4,000 workers in the state of Missouri. So these are our jobs.
Make sure you fill out a witness form. And any questions for this witness? Seeing none, anyone else in favor of this concurrent resolution? Seeing no more, do we have anyone against these two resolutions? Seeing none, do we have anyone here for informational purposes only?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Leanne Tippett-Mosby. I'm not the devil, but I am from the Department of Natural Resources. I just want to clarify a couple things, just some of the questions that came up, just factual information. So, and some of the witnesses did a great job, but the EPA was supposed to finalize the rule this June, but that's been delayed. They said probably later this summer. The plans will be due, our state plans will be due next June, and then the implementation time period is 2030, as we said. There was an interim time frame in the rule from 2020. They would have to have some reductions by 2020. There was a lot of feedback from states on that, that was an industry that was an unreasonable goal. So it may be changed in the final rule. The other thing, there was a question about federal implementation plan. EPA has signaled that they are preparing a federal implementation plan to the extent that states do not do a state implementation plan, that would be a backstop. that EPA would prepare. So, and I'm happy to also try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for this witness, Representative Redmond?
Not clicking.
Good, it's hard to tell with you.
Sorry, to inquire.
Proceed.
And I'm really just trying to get facts on this one. Air quality in Missouri, do we have a measure of where our air quality, are we in it? I mean, do we do something like that, or what is our air quality?
Absolutely. We do have some areas where we have some air quality challenges. In St. Louis area for ozone, fine particles. We have a couple of areas where we have trouble with sulfur dioxide. This proposal is a little bit different. So, and I think one of the previous witnesses kind of pointed out, when you're talking about CO2, you're talking about reducing the impacts of climate change. So it's not like we're looking at the level of pollutant in the air and looking at a level to reduce it to, although, so it's not like traditional pollutants. So when you're talking about ozone or sulfur dioxide, you're talking about a certain level in the air that directly affects someone's health. When you're talking about CO2, you're talking about a global pollutant and the effects on climate change and, the impacts, to weather patterns and things like that. So that it's more indirect effects. So you can't really look at it on a state-by-state basis.
Okay. And I'll try to, I apologize, I'll get with her offline.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? Representative McNeil.
Thank you, Chairman Klein.
Proceed.
Good afternoon. So, two things. Basically, the EPA is mandating that we do 10% reduction in, well, no, let me go back to this question that Representative Berry was asking. Is it that we have to cut 22% of our CO2 emissions by, and so it's,
Actually, Representative Berry did a great job on that, and a previous witness that testified. What EPA did was they established 4 building blocks, and they did an analysis of what they felt that the states could achieve on a state-by-state basis. So each state has its own individual goal, and that that 21% is a reduction in the rate of CO2 emission.
so the state of Missouri has a rate of 21%, 22%?
21 to 22.
Okay, 21%, but the state of Illinois might have a different percentage.
Correct.
So they kind of fashion this for our state directly, probably because we have so much dependence on coal.
That's correct. EPA tried to take into consideration the different energy profile in each state when they were establishing the goals.
Right. And so, and we have until 2030 to implement this.
The final implementation, the final reduction is by 2030. And it remains to be seen whether or not there will be an interim goal once the final rule is out.
And so that's, so basically we're talking 15 years to implement this. And help me to remember again the Proposition C with renewables, we're supposed to have what percentage of our energy usage?
I'm sorry, I
don't know.
I don't know that.
It seems like it's 20%. So that's by 2020, I believe. So, and then you mentioned climate change. I've attended a conference several years ago. They talked about by 2050, they are predicting that a state like Missouri, Midwest, will be seeing on a very regular basis something like 100 days a year of 100+ weather. So 3 months of 100+ weather if we continue on down this path. So is that your understanding on some of the effects, what would be some of the effects of climate change on Missouri?
I'll have to say I'm not well versed in that, Representative McNeil, but I could try to provide to find some information for you on that and some of the projections, but I'm not well versed in that area.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Any other for informational purposes only?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Trey Davis, President, Registered Lobbyist for the Missouri Energy Development Association. We represent Missouri's investor-owned utilities, electric, natural gas, and water in Missouri. We supply energy to about 4 million of the 6 million inhabitants in this state. Our concern and why I want to testify for informational purposes is regarding If this rule were to come into effect, beyond anything that's done here in the legislature, if we throw out all the stops, if this becomes a regulation that we have to live with at the end of the day, if all the stops are pulled and we try to litigate it every different way, if it goes into effect, at some point down the line, someone's going to have to oversee it, someone's going to have to pay for it, and someone's going to have to implement it. And at the end of the day, our concern is going down a path that allows the federal government to do that versus the state of Missouri and the Department of Natural Resources. And I think when we talk about a federal implementation plan versus a state implementation plan, if this were to have to be enacted and implemented here in Missouri, it would be preferable to go down the path where we have much more flexibility with Department of Natural Resources versus a federal implementation plan. So that's just something that I thought you'd make aware to the committee. It was referenced by the co-ops earlier, but that is a concern as we move forward that I wanted to share with the groups. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for this? Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, I keep on hearing about this boogeyman that's in the closet at night. Why don't you tell me why the federal government does not go ahead and enforce their regulations right now? Why is the state of Missouri enforcing federal regulations? Everybody keeps saying that they'd rather have the state of Missouri enforcing these regulations than the federal government. Why isn't the federal government doing it right now?
Well, because the process is not to the point where the federal government has the authority to do that. We are
The government doesn't have the authority to enforce its own regulations.
The regulation has not been finalized at this point, sir.
Oh, I know. I'm talking about the existing regulations. They don't enforce them here in the state of Missouri. They're being enforced through the Department of Natural Resources.
I don't think I understand where you're going with your question.
Current regulations.
Correct.
That are compounded under the EPA. They are being enforced, for the most part, in the state of Missouri through the Department of Natural Resources. The existing regulations, are they not?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because according to whatever regulation you may be speaking of, there's a part of oversight that comes from the Department of Natural Resources. Therefore, the companies that I represent comply with the Department of Natural Resources and in turn the EPA, and we follow those guidelines.
I suggest it's because the federal government doesn't have the ability to enforce those in the state of Missouri due to its largesse of regulations. They're not going to get the ability to do it in the first place. I think it is exactly what it is putting in the closet. And I don't think it is the state of Missouri needs to do or the federal government will do it. I think the state of Missouri needs to stop doing it. I don't think the federal government will pick up and do it themselves. That's just my suggestion.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other questions? Representative Neal.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, I was trying to get the gist of what you're saying here. Basically, if we do not develop our own state energy plan and ask that, and have the Department of Natural Resources or Conservation help us implement it, then it is the assumption, despite what the gentleman, from Marshall District, Representative Platt, sorry, said, but the assumption is that the EPA will in fact have people come in and oversee our efforts at that and kind of tell us what to do.
The way that we understand the process right now is when the rule comes down, right now there is an understanding that the states have the ability to implement and develop the rules, guidelines, how they go about getting to that percentage goal, that reduction in carbon. The states have the ability to develop a plan to do that. That's essentially what a state implementation plan means. The federal government, the EPA, has made it known that if you as a state, some states right now are saying they're not going to do it. They're going to, come test the theory if you're going to bring in a federal implementation plan or not. Some are waiting to see exactly how the rule comes down, if they will be able to comply with the state plan versus, going to a federal plan. But that is our understanding. If you choose not to, as a state, to comply through flexibility of a statewide plan, then a federal implementation plan would come in and would direct your state about how to comply with that. And the concern that we have is if we get to that place, we think what we have now is onerous, take that up another level.
The resolutions that we have currently before us, do you feel like they're kind of heading us in that direction of saying, no, we're not going to go forward with.
Why I testified for information is I don't have a
Right, okay.
position on that. I just wanted to make.
I withdraw my
clear on
motion.
concern.
Thank you.
Representative Barry,
Required.
proceed.
So can the federal government come in under a federal implementation plan? Can they come in and regulate 20% energy conservation?
It's all up in the air. I mean, there's so much that is unknown right now. It depends on if they want to change how the allotment.
Do they have authority to regulate outside the fence?
The concern is they have the ability to make up that pie to reach what your goal is. They have the ability to dictate that. And so there is a concern that if we go down that path, then their compliance measures may end up costing customers a heck of a lot more than what a state like Missouri through their Department of Natural Resources or another state, the way that they might build their compliance plan that would minimize those costs for customers as much as possible to still achieve the goal.
Because the discussion that, has been going on is that a federal implementation plan means that they will go down the regulation of regulating the power plants. Okay, because they have authority clearly demarcated on power plants. They have no authority on conservation or renewables or any of the other building blocks. And if you only have one block, then that's a real problem.
Oh, it's a big problem, because as you know, Mr. Stewart mentioned earlier, we've squeezed about as much efficiency out of these current plants as possible. And so once you've done that, then what's your next step? You shut it down. And then you talk about jobs, then you talk about shifting costs. Where are you going to go to make up that emissions goal that you need to hit?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else for informational purposes only? Seeing none, do we have anything final from the sponsor?
Not necessarily, but thank you for listening to this. I mean, this is an issue. One of the thoughts that came in some of the questions, we're not saying, oh, there should be no regulation, not at the state level, not at the federal level. I mean, we are saying there should be balance in the proposal of those. I mean, a lot of these things that are specific to us as Missourians need to be considered. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further witnesses, this will close the hearing on House Resolution number 425 and House Concurrent Resolution number 32. The Committee on Energy and Environment will now go into executive session. I move that House Resolution number 425 be voted do pass. Any discussion? Yes.
Gentlemen, just checking to see, we just heard the bill, we're gonna accept on the same day we do it.
Yes, we are.
I don't know if we can beat this horse anymore to death. I don't know if we're gonna change Representative Ellington's mind on this at all. I've tried all day. All right, any other further questions on House Resolution number 425?
All right. Please call the roll. Yes.
Oh, this is on 425? Yes. Aye.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Ellington?
No.
Yes. Goldmeyer?
Yes.
Marshall?
Yes.
Leo? No. Beckman?
Yes.
Rinaldi?
Yes.
Brennan?
Yes.
By your vote of 11 ayes and 2 noes, you have voted House Resolution number 425 do pass. Now I'm going to move that House concurrent resolution number 32 be voted to pass. Any discussion? I thought I'd also put in here a little bit, Representative Corlew's suggestion on sort of sticking in some the actual rule we're talking about is a good idea. I will be carrying a substitute to the higher committee and see if it will be worked on. I have a feeling it will be looked at. Fairly decent odds. So anyway, any other discussion? Seeing none, would you please, Paul?
I was going to make a comment.
Go ahead.
It's not a big one. I just want everybody to pay attention that we're about to vote on something that doesn't even tell you what it is. It's good legislation.
Thank you. I think it goes for most rules of EPA, but I got you. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Yes. Yes.
Kelowna, please.
Aye.
Yes.
Condon,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Ellington,
No.
Newbrick. Yes. Kilpatrick,
Yes.
McNeil. No. Stedman,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
and Lenny.
Yes.
By your vote of 11 and 2, you have voted House concurrent resolution number 32 do pass. Seeing no further information before the committee, Energy Environment is now adjourned.
Here's my, Ginger ale.